Welcome to the Hustle or Bust podcast powered by Paverart. Our mission is simple: to dive deep into the world of entrepreneurship, small business, and all the success, struggle, and challenges that need to be confronted in the pursuit of growth. We celebrate the entrepreneurial spirit, but perhaps most important, we want you to learn at least one idea that you can put into action immediately to make your investment in time worthwhile.
We are going to dive into the world of capital expenditures, or CapEx for short, on episode 38 of the Hustle or Bust podcast. We're going to deal with this topic through two transformational projects that we've embarked on at Paverart over the past 5 years. The war stories, the learnings, and what we could have done better. We hope you're going to learn something from this podcast and drop us a line with some feedback. So why don't we define CapEx, right? Because let's start with some basic definitions. In a business, and I'm not an accountant, you're the accountant in the group, but you've got operating expenses, which are generally expenses that are incurred. I believe that how an accountant would define it. Operating expenses are expenses that you incur during the course of 1 year, one fiscal year. Mm-hmm. It's marketing, it's salaries, it's your rent. CapEx are generally considered investment in assets, and it could be software, it could be soft assets or hard assets, that are generally considered to have benefit more than a year. It's equipment. It could be a software development, an ERP system, things like that.
Right.
So you got OpEx and you got CapEx. I think the focus of this discussion is how have we looked at the world of CapEx?
Capital expenditure, for the most part,
long-term. From
the accounting end, yes, is more long term. It's long term equipment. It's to boil it down to an accounting end. It's something that's going to be amortizable. Okay.
Let me give you one other example. One of the things that I do for fun, because I'm a business geek, I look at businesses that are on the market for sale, and I always learn something from doing it. And I don't do it just for an educational, academic exercise. I do it because I'm looking at buying businesses that could be long-term growth oriented. I came across a business in Union County, right where I live. It's about 10 miles from my house. And on a balance sheet that they disclosed in a SIM, a confidential information memorandum, is retained earnings. And this is a business that's similar to Paverart in the fact that it's got a 2-decade-year operating history, 20 years, and it's got a negative retained earnings. It was about $200,000 of negative retained earnings. And I kind of knew what that was, but I Googled it, right, to give myself a refresher. Retained earnings is the accumulated profit that a business has from day one, profit and or loss, minus the amount of money it's pushed out to the shareholders, the owners of the business. And it was negative. So that could mean that there was negative income or losses, or they're not putting money out to shareholders. But generally, you don't want to see a negative retained earnings for a business that's 20 years and is now for sale.
Right.
It's a red flag. So generally, owners had that decision. At the end of the year, if they make $100,000 or $1 million, whatever they make, they've got an investment decision to make, which falls into CapEx, which says, how much of that profit am I going to put in my pocket as an owner, or how much do I want to put back into the business? And some people balance it, but those are investment decisions that an owner's got to make as it relates to their business. So anyway, retained earnings, I want to get that out there just as a concept. If you're looking at businesses and if you're looking at your own business, I'd encourage you to look at your balance sheet. And a lot of people don't pay any attention to this. They look at profit and loss and revenue. Those are the common metrics people look at. Take a look at your retained earnings, and is that number negative? Is it zero, or is it a big number, meaning that you're plowing a lot of profit back into the business, or you're very profitable? So it's a key quick tell for people looking to buy businesses.
Interesting, and the again, that's part of the balance sheet. That's not part of the P&L statement.
That's right.
That's part of the balance sheet. That's two separate items for those folks out there that don't know too much about the accounting end of running a business. But having said all that, start digging into the whole CapEx situation, we have to get a little historical here, and I'll keep this short. The original capital expenditures that this business went through was the first piece of cutting equipment that we bought that actually started the business, and a forklift. Those were the two biggies.
And they're expensive.
And the capital expenditures tend to be, on that, they tend to be the biggest, exposure of capital that you're going to have. But having said all that, and we existed with those same two pieces of equipment for the first 15 years that we were a business. Okay, and we have now been in business 20 years as of the month of March 2023, and that all changed over the last 5 years. The first big leap that we took from a capital expenditure standpoint was, and actually I think we did both of these in the same year, was to purchase another piece of cutting equipment, which would double our capacity, or not capacity, double our capability, and also purchase another forklift. And our original forklift was purchased used. The forklift that we bought was a brand new forklift. So, our foreseeable future on that's easily 20 years, because forklifts are one of those things, like copiers, they just never die.
Right.
Copiers, dehumidifiers, and fork trucks just they seem to last forever. At any rate, having said that, the process we went through was a learning experience for both you and I, actually working together to determine how we were going to get this first new piece of cutting equipment. And that was not new, that was used, but we got it locally, and we had to figure out how we were going to incorporate that into our current space. We didn't have the opportunity to expand our space at the time, so we had to take what we had and significantly rearrange the thousands of square feet that we have in our manufacturing facility, and find a place to put that new piece of cutting equipment in.
Can I stop you there and interject my memory?
Please, I was going to segue right out of this, so because I wanted to,
It's an interesting take, the story. How the story, the project, the opportunity to get the other piece of equipment came about is a guy up the road who we know came to us and said, "I'm getting rid of my major piece of equipment. Do you guys want to buy it?" Interesting, right? So we sat down, we talked, we reconnected. I gave him a tour of the facility, and as you have people into your business, and I'm cautious with it, but I generally am pretty liberal with having people come through our shop, because I always learn something. I get their reaction. His first reaction was negative. "Oh my God, this place hasn't changed in over a decade. It's the same place that I saw." It that wears on you, it gets under your skin a little bit, right?
Sure.
But you file it away, and obviously I had plans to reinvigorate it and throw a little money at it, throw a little energy, change the company for the better. But I took that away. But then it's like, all right, we got an opportunity now to double our capacity, but we've got a small plant. It's 8,000 square feet. So you're sitting where one machine is, and I'm sitting where an engraving facility is. And I take you and Brian out to the shop, and I tell Brian, "Hey, we've got an opportunity to buy another big piece of equipment. It will double our capacity." He's like, "Yeah, nice. Where are you going to put it?" And I see right here where this engraving facility is? It was a room,
right,
the size of, let's say, 4 big master bedrooms.
It's what we normally refer to as the prep room.
The prep room.
Yeah.
I said, simple. I'm going to knock that sucker down. And you see that room? We had another prep room up in the front of the shop. I say, "You see above that prep room down there? Look above it. What do you see?" Nothing. That's right. You've got about 15 feet of air. So I've always said air is a hidden asset in every business. Nobody uses the height of the building. They don't go up to the ceiling with it. That's why skyscrapers in a tight area called Manhattan work. You're not going to run out of air. You just keep going high, but you are going to run out of land. We were the same way in the shop. So we had to knock down a piece of a prep room and then go higher with the other one to make up for that square footage.
That's right.
Easier said than done. But that was the first thing about the first instinct is when you're in an operating mode of 10 to 15 years, let's say, and you do something like that, you can't do it. Where are you going to put it? And you look around, there's no space. Well, you got to knock something down and use the air. Again, easier said than done, but that was the first. All right, that's somewhere where a new owner, a new person coming into the business with fresh eyes, they can see things a little bit more clear with different experience.
Let's take a 35,000 foot overview of that. So the initial encounter.
Let me give you another example on air, by the way, and then go back.
No problem.
Here, real practical, nitty-gritty, grit, grind stuff. Every business owner out there, if they've got a dumpster in their yard, go look at the dumpster, and I guarantee you 30% of that is wasted space. And what causes the wasted space, do you think?
Well,
Cardboard boxes.
boxes are the biggest problem.
Boxes are one giant pain in the ass. They suck the money out of every business. And people take a box, they open up their package or whatever, they throw it in the dumpster. Well, when that box, and then you throw garbage on it, it's taking up space. That's all fucking air. You got to crush that box, and now all of a sudden you freed up space.
Right.
If you do that over time, you can literally save thousands of dollars. Now, you might need to get a trash compactor, but trash, they're not that much money when you start adding up, cutting your frequency of trash delivery. So this concept of air, you got the box that's sucking money out of you. Every box that goes in there, you can put a dollar value to it. If you just crush the damn thing or stomp on it with your feet, you don't need a freaking machine. Just do it with your foot. Every plant I've ever been in, when you look, I get fascinated by this, looking at the trash can. And when I had banks come through my business to reevaluate it, I would sit in front of the garbage thing and talk about my dumpster and the fact that it was taking up room. And then here's what we did, and now we saved $5,000. And they'd be looking at me like, this freaking guy's crazy. He's talking about trash like it's, well. And no one. I said, why? Is that unusual? They said, we've loaned to 85 businesses a year. No one talks about this. Like, you don't loan to the right businesses then. They don't know how to make money. Now, I'm being dramatic for effect, but you get the idea. Air is a hidden asset or a profit suck out of all these businesses. I bet every restaurant, I bet all, now this could be common news, but if you can just crush that damn box and save yourself $1,000 a year, why wouldn't you? It's behavior. It's simple stuff. It's how you look at the business.
Well, the analogy is that prep room and where it was located was in what I would consider a highly productive area. That part of the factory had all the electrical accoutrements, the boxes, the incoming power, the fact that you had the other cutting machine directly across from that prep room meant that all of that internal hardware was located in that part of the building. Okay, so the first and most logical place to put the new account or the new cutting equipment would be in that space. It would save money in the short term, and it would be from a logistical standpoint and a workflow process standpoint, just smart to put it there. But when you first look at it, and you have been in this position for 15, at this point, I guess it was maybe 16 or 17 years, it's hard to fight that stasis. It's hard to fight that.
It's uncomfortable.
Yeah, it is. Now, you need an outside party, and in this particular case, at that point in our business cycle, the Paverart business cycle, you were that outside influence. Okay, you were the one that you could take that 35,000 foot look and say, come on, guys, let's get out of our comfort zone here. Let's get out of the survival mode. We need to have a second machine. This first machine goes down for any length of time, and we've learned this lesson the hard way. We're pretty much out of business, okay, for that time period. So that's what got it all started. And
now this was late 2019.
Right.
We started contemplating the project, and we started construction and delivery after the permits and all that stuff in January of 2020. Which, lo and behold, and by the way, one of the things that owners need to think about as it relates to CapEx, this is a hardcore, this is not a theoretical exercise. This is, the first thing you got to ask yourself is, what's the benefit? The second one is, what's the cost? And then the third thing is, how are you going to pay for it all? Are you going to put debt in the business? Are you going to raise capital? Are you going to use that retained earnings that you built up in your bank account and not choose to pull it and put it in your pocket, but put it back into the business? We decided to fund it internally. I didn't want to put debt in the business. It was too early. And we did that. And we had a little bit of a cash balance that I bought the company with, but I was going to take that down to bare bones minimum. And this was December of 19, and I thought we would be done with the project by late Feb of 2020, which was right around the corner of.
Well, this doesn't exist.
You know what?
Yeah, this whole project didn't exist in a vacuum. It wasn't just this. There was a lot of other things in other departments that had to occur.
That's right.
You
remember how many whiteboard sheets or flip chart sheets?
Yeah, my whole office, it looked like wallpaper.
Right, and that was project plans.
It was project plans, and it wasn't just project plans for how we were going to make that work, how we were going to get the electrical, who's the electrician going to be, who's the plumber, are we going to need to get another chiller, are we going to get, there's a dozen or more different decisions that had to come into play. But by the time that thing hit the floor, we had to have a reason for it to be there, which means sales. Okay, so we had to do other things in the meantime while all this is going on. This is the bane of a small business. You don't have 9 departments that are responsible for helping to get these to roll out a new product. You've got basically, at that point we had 5 guys, and at some time 4, depending on the time of the year, 4 guys. And everybody's responsible for 25% to 20 to 25% of the business. You have things that you have to do every day, and all that had to continue while we were doing this. And to me, that's the amazing part. It's only amazing when you sit back and look at it, and if it's been successful. If it wasn't successful, we wouldn't be having this. I don't know if we'd be having this podcast.
Let me give you the postmortem on because if I had to do it over again, I'm not sure I would do it differently. But we got lucky. Luck is always one of those things. Let's say, hypothetically.
No, I'm going to challenge that. In what way did we get lucky?
Well, I talked about, all right, what is the project going to cost you? What do you expect to benefit, and how are you going to finance it?
Right.
All right, so we're going to finance it through the cash in our bank account. Let's just say, hypothetically, that a comfortable operating position for any hypothetical business is $100,000 of cash in the bank. That covers a few weeks' worth of payroll cycles, your rent. Let's just say that's a month and a half worth of expenses, or 2 months. Every business owner thinks of it differently. So we had $100,000 in the bank, hypothetically.
Right.
And this project, lo and behold, would cost us 1.5 times that, or 90% of that. So we'd have to take our business from $100,000 of cash in the bank down to about $10,000. So really bare bones minimum, 10% of our comfortable balance. And this was fourth quarter of 2019. Well, we had no idea this thing called COVID-19 would hit in March of 2020.
Right, which was
and we got done
shortly after this piece of equipment was installed.
This project goes through in Q1 of 2020, right? We used every bit of it was a $125,000 project.
Right.
And we got down to the bare bones minimum. And we get done with the project, and then COVID hits, right? So I got no money in the bank, or very little money, and then COVID hits. And it's like, oh, shit, now what? So the question is, I often play the game with myself. If I knew in October of 2019 that COVID was going to happen, would I have still gone through the project? And I hope that answer is yes, but no one's got a crystal ball. Where I said we got lucky is I didn't know, right? The world doesn't have perfect information. You can't predict things like that. But we did take the cash balance down to bare bones minimum. Now, we didn't put debt in the business. So anyway, the only reason why I bring that up is it's illustrative of, do you do it through your bank? Do you put on debt? Do you bring in equity? We got lucky in the fact that we brought it down to bare bones, and then we figured out how to survive COVID, and we never put debt in the business. But it was tight, really, really tight.
And I'll add a little bit more suspense to this story. COVID was not just, were we going to be able to keep our doors open as a manufacturing concern and keep everybody working and keep making product. That was one issue that we could not get it. That answer came quickly, but you didn't know whether they were going to turn that off at any moment down the road.
The government shut down, you mean?
The government shut down.
Right.
The business shut down in New Jersey. Okay. Were we going to be one of those classified groups that, no, you got to close your doors, and if you don't close your doors, we're going to arrest you?
Yeah, we would have wiped out capital.
That's right. So that was one. But on the other side of this, there was the whole impact that COVID had on the economy. And how was that going to affect us in regards to sales? So you're getting it from both ends. We thought 08 and 09 here were really, really difficult. And it was a true test of what we were made of to get through that. And we got through that, okay? And I told myself, if we got through this, we can get through anything.
Right.
Well, COVID came along, and we questioned that again.
Well, I think it's...
But for what, but go ahead.
Where we got lucky is if you never have perfect information, but if you knew that the shit was going to hit the fan in the global economy in March of 2020, you'd be crazy to go through with that project and take your cash balance down to zero.
Yeah.
If you knew that was going to happen, you probably would have built your cash up, maybe taken a loan and triple your cash balance so you can survive, be the last man standing. Thank God we didn't know what was going to happen, because most people wouldn't have, and I don't think I would have gone through with that.
Yeah.
I'd be lying to myself. I'd love to think I'm this bravado business owner, but you'd be freaking crazy to go into that calamity with no cash in the bank. And that's basically what we did. Now, we didn't know it was coming. We found a way to survive, so it all worked out, but there's a big luck factor in this. So the project and timing, you can't predict, but that was an aggressive, hindsight's 2020, I took it out of the bank, not knowing that this calamity would hit. We survived it, but it was but that is a factor in how do you do this. If you're going to fund, there's a case to be made that funding CapEx through the cash in the bank, your working capital, is the most risky, not the most conservative. I worked in heavily leveraged, high debt businesses, and I generally prefer not to have the debt. I'd rather than pay the bank the interest, the VIG, I'd rather keep that in my pocket. So, but anyway, that's hindsight being 2020, but you do have to put a conscious thought process into how do you finance this stuff.
Part of the risk management or the risk management assessment of that particular CapEx project was involving items and things that we knew we had some control over, okay? There are things we can do in the sales department. There's things that we can do in the, in the operations department. Every department had a way to help justify the fact that we needed another piece of cutting equipment in here and another fork truck, another forklift.
Well, I think
what you don't have, there's, and the reason that risk assessment and that risk analysis can usually be successfully done, and so that you can sleep at night and feel that what you're doing is, a good thing and it makes sense, and the downside is very small because you've gone through that risk assessment analysis. COVID, nobody knows. Nobody knew. The government didn't know. The government fumbled along for the better part of a year and a half trying to figure out what the hell they were going to do, because this is the largest economy in the world. Period. End of story. We control a lot of what other people, how other people react and how they deal with their businesses outside of this country. That's how important we are. And we didn't know what the hell we were doing. That people would like, well, I don't know if I disagree with that. I think, but at the end of the day, how do you do a risk assessment analysis, and factor in COVID when COVID is that was the great unknown.
You can't.
Yeah,
it's out of your control, right? So I don't spend a lot of time thinking. It's a fun thought exercise that if I knew COVID was there, would I have done the project?
Exactly.
But at the end of the day, we were talking yesterday about the global economy or the current economy.
Right.
You made the statement that you think, talking to your brother, that the economy is a hell of a lot worse now than it was in 2019, I guess, was the basis period?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Let's work under that assumption.
Okay, so because you can't compare COVID as that's what the economy was. That was a once in a lifetime thing. You hope, right?
Exactly.
But so let's just say pre-COVID, and you're probably right. But I look at unemployment. I look at things. But really, what I look at is how am I personally doing? Here's how I measure the economy. It's kind of like Reagan. Mm-hmm. Are you better off now than you were at whatever base period that you're looking for? Mm-hmm. And Paverart 2023 versus 2019. Now, Paverart's not the economy. We're a small little, we're not even a fraction of the economy. But that's how I measure the world.
Sure.
Now, I'm not naive to think that I've been through government policy really wreaking havoc or benefit on business. So they are related, but you generally can't. It's like COVID. You can't control who the numbnuts are in Washington and what they're going to do to screw you up. All you can do is control what you can control.
Well,
and it's a stressful conversation for me. Anytime I talk about global shit, because I can't impact it.
I know.
I can only operate within it and then try to do my best.
And you try to peg whatever it is that you read, hear, see, listen to, and how that's going to affect your business, because your business every day it's what puts money in your pocket and food in your mouth. And,
so back to the CapEx project. CapEx project number 1. How did it work? How did that machine perform? If you remember.
Oh, do I remember? Are you kidding? Do I remember? It's the phone calls. My goodness, how
would you?
Not so well.
It was a fucking disaster.
Not so well. Now, but having said that, we had part of that risk management approach and analysis included an outside source that we found over a period of a couple of years that we could trust. We could trust his.
Define not so well.
We could trust his input in regards to fixing the problems that we had with that piece of cutting equipment, and what that the biggest problem was once it was installed and we had everything lined up, you think, okay, here we go. We're going to start, man, we are going to move now, and this is going to relieve, it's going to take some of the pressure out of the operations balloon. We've got another piece of equipment that's a backup in case the other piece of equipment goes down. All those good things, and it was in place. We don't have this thing up and running for a month yet, and it's pinging leaks everywhere. Okay,
There was no uptime.
No,
We were spending more time fixing the damn thing.
we spent more time fixing it than we
stepped
did
backwards.
operating it. But again,
And just to give a little context around it, imagine having a car with an internal combustion engine, and that's what you run in your shop.
Right.
And now you bought a machine that doesn't have an internal combustion engine. It's got not an electric engine. It's got a different type of engine that you're not used to. And your current shop is a warhorse with your machine and the internal combustion engine.
Mm-hmm.
You go into a new shop that does similar things. These machines cut. That's what they do. But it's got a different engine. So the assumption, and by the way, the thing was sparkling clean. And we've got a dirty plant because we're cutting through sand. Dirt goes everywhere. So we're impressed by the glitz and the glamour of the machine. It's sparkling clean.
right.
So this thing's got to be a brand new machine. It's got barely any use on it. It's got a different freaking engine. And when you put that in our shop, we spend all of our time and energy trying to figure out how to make this engine work, and it wasn't working. It was springing leaks, problems, costing. We put more money into trying to fix that machine and rebuild it than we did the cost of the machine. Not exactly a great project there.
We spent the first
We basically tore the machine. We tore the inner workings of it out and rebuilt it.
we spent the first 2 months learning how to. We didn't have to learn how to run the machine. We knew how to run the machine.
Right.
We were what a lot of people don't realize is when you get a used piece of equipment like that, what you're getting into is understanding how to fix it because it's going to break down. And this thing was breaking down every 3 days.
It was a nightmare.
Okay.
We essentially bought a machine that was not fit for our operation.
But the one that's right. But the one thing, and again, because I like to keep going back to the risk assessment. We brought down. Had we not had the relationship with the person we had that relationship with that knew this equipment inside and out, we don't get to the suggestion that you know what, I have an idea. We need to change the engine that's running this piece of equipment. Now, I have some experience with that. I know that there's another piece of equipment that we can bring in, shove into this baby, get rid of the one that's in there now, and that should fix the problem. Well, then now you go through a whole nother list of risk assessment. First of all, what's it going to cost? How long is it going to take to get it?
Well, you're talking about our tech, but I think we got to give the credit to Brian. Brian came forward, our own guy,
Right.
in concert with our tech at the time,
Right.
and said, "Why don't we just swap out the engine
And
and get the same engine that we have in our old machine?"
And
over
you're
this
right.
machine?"
And I didn't recall that until you just brought it up. But at the same time, that just complicated matters.
Right.
But, again, whatever was spent to get that piece of equipment in here, and yes, it was used, and yes, it was not brand new, so it wasn't like we were paying for a brand new piece of equipment. But
So let's add context to it. That first project was a $50,000 purchase of used machinery
Right.
and an all-in project of knocking down this and rebuilding that. Let's just say 125. We made the assumption that a sparkling new machine with a different engine could be plugged in and it would work. We were wrong on that. So after 4 months of downtime and nightmares and repair costs and technicians, we throw in the white flag and say, let's rebuild the damn thing.
Right.
So another 30 grand goes into it. I'm buying a new engine and repairing it and getting it up and running. Now that worked, but you took a $125,000 project, and if you added in all the downtime and lost energy and labor and techs and equipment, it probably became a $200,000 project.
Right.
So from that standpoint, overblown, did not do what it did, but I think we got that new machine rebuilt November-ish maybe.
yeah,
But throughout all this is COVID, and we're trying to deal with that.
right.
So we took the balance down to practically zero. COVID hits and the machine ain't working, and it's like, oh fuck, how do we get through this thing? And Brian and the tech are out there trying to put duct tape and bubble gum on the thing. The leaks. Finally, we rebuilt it, so that was another $30,000 plus the tech. So tough project, had to be done. But all of that year of 2020,
Credit's due also to John, who
John
had
did
to,
and by the way, John was a brand new employee in January, so he saw
Yeah.
the machine. He saw the building get knocked down. Imagine this. Now go back to small business. We bring in a crackerjack new employee, Army, Coast Guard reserves, right? Veteran, all the things that you want. beautiful employee, got stuff done, and he's living through this.
Yeah.
First year on the job.
What did I get myself into?
Right.
Well,
what great experience though. Can anybody now, not to go into John, but to think about that first year. Are you going to get that experience in a big corporation where you've got one thing to do?
The lesson learned there is dive in head first, attack it every day. Don't let it beat you down.
And if you got to throw the white towel in, throw the white towel in.
But,
we had to admit defeat. We bought a machine that ain't going to work.
Yeah, but
let's rebuild this damn
thing. But the happy ending to this story is that once we put the new engine in, okay, not only did it work, but it's worked flawlessly since then, and repairs are virtually, I'm not going to say nil. I mean, there's wear parts that have to be repaired, that have to be replaced from time to time. But that thing has been running very, very successfully now for the better part of 3 years.
Well, let's be honest and candid here. 15-year business at the time decides to go down in this CapEx, double production capacity. We didn't know what the fuck we were doing. Hindsight's 2020. I can see the error. I can see how to make it work. I can knock that down. I can build that up. I can put that machine there with double the capacity, and I can do the risk assessment, and I can do the math. I was not smart enough to know that machine, that engine, ain't going to work here. And none of us were. And we had a tech, one of the best techs in the industry, that couldn't assess that.
So
we had the talent around us.
But let's remember, again, this is part of building a business, a small business. You can't surround yourself with too many experts, people who know their stuff and are willing to help you in exchange for getting paid. But at the same time, that we searched for somebody for years. We found somebody, and if you want to call that luck, okay. But him falling into our laps really made this. It gave us a partner to work with that it took a lot of pressure off. What are we going to do? Are we going to go to cutting equipment school?
Right.
No, that's not going to happen. Okay, but initiating the strategy to go find that person was also part of growing this business.
Right.
Because we never had that before. We relied on the OEM, which is a mistake.
But how do you go through? Grade that first project, the first big CapEx project, the Paverart's history, post opening it up. Give it a letter grade.
Well, okay, if
we're over budget, almost double. The engine, now we got the double production capacity.
This is very subjective. If I were to grade it based on the results, I'd give it an A. But if I were to grade it, if you asked me for a grade on that project in the middle of it, I'd have given it a D.
Yeah.
Okay? But the fact of the matter is, we should, I know I did. The piece of cutting equipment that we used to start this business is still running successfully every day. That's 20 plus years. Now, there's been parts that have been replaced, switched out, repaired. It's just there's a ton of that is going on with that piece of equipment, but it's still running, and it runs successfully every day.
That's not the CapEx project, though.
No, that's not the CapEx project. But knowing that was enough for me to understand and realize and feel comfortable and confident with the fact that this newer used piece of equipment was going to do the same thing. It's from the same company.
Right.
It's parts.
It was a leap.
It's a collection of parts that, when working together successfully, is going to allow us to have our second piece of equipment. And it did. It did that. There was no doubt in my mind that was going to happen. But when you're in the midst of it, and it's a little scary, it's a little exciting, and but more scary than exciting. But if I were to grade it overall, the entire experience, I would absolutely give it an A. And the reason I give it an A is because we had a very successful outcome. That piece of equipment has been running every day for 3 years with virtually no problems. We haven't had to call anybody for that piece of equipment when was the last time? Now, I probably jinxed it, but I'd give it a grade A. So I really would, only because of the results of that. Only because it turned out very, very positive.
I think you're looking
how would you grade it?
Well, it's as an owner, and we're talking about CapEx, you got to know how to evaluate the project. And I think what you're getting at, which is the smart, rational way to look at it, the reason why you gave it an A is because you're looking at it over the past 3-4 years.
Correct.
Right? You're not looking at it as that year. As I'm thinking and reliving that project, I'm thinking about we took the cash down to zero, or pretty close to zero. COVID hit. The machine ain't fucking working, and I'm pissed. Right? We bought a freaking lemon, and it was our fault. He didn't sell us a bill of goods. He just sells. We didn't know, and nor did our tech, that ain't going to work in our environment the way, because he was running the thing once a month, and we're running that thing every day for 8 hours.
What were your other options?
Right.
We had to get a second machine.
Right.
That was, when you and I sat down and talked about this, we came out of that meeting and said, we got to get a second machine.
So it was the right decision.
That fell in. But the only other option was to go out and shop it. And Lord knows where you're going to find another used machine and what condition it would be in.
We wouldn't have found something, and COVID would have hit, and we wouldn't be here.
This was local.
Yeah, so this was local. It got us into the deal. It was quick.
And your only other option was to buy a new machine.
Right, which would have been $300,000.
And shell out $250,000 for the equipment.
Right.
And then another $100,000 to get it installed, get it running, and work out all the,
And we didn't have the cash, or would have had to put that on. So overall, I'd agree with you. Having said that, the learnings, I think, is, all right, you got a machine, it's in that shop, it's used, it's at fair price. Is it going to work in your shop?
Right.
We got that, is it going to work in our shop part wrong. Now, the good thing is we had a smart enough, dedicated enough team that finally threw in the white towel and said, we got to rebuild it, or we're going to be dealing with this freaking mess forever.
Yeah.
So that was the key thing, is we had a strong enough team that can course correct as the thing didn't go right, or like we expected. So I think I would give it an A too, but there was a lot of unknowns, and anytime you double your budget or you significantly cost overrun, it's hard to give it an A, at least in that time period. So, but yeah, I think.
Well, if you're looking at the time period, it would be very easy to kind of give this a
D minus.
Yeah, maybe a D minus,
yeah,
something
and
like
it
that.
sucked a lot of freaking profit out of the company.
Yeah.
Just trying to service that thing in the middle of COVID. So, but yeah, I tend to agree with you. It was an A. We had to do it. If we didn't have that opportunity, we would have shopped it. COVID would have hit, and we might. Who the hell knows where we'd be right now without it? So overall, I give it an A too. But
let's not forget, had we not gotten that second machine, the first and the original piece of equipment that we had that has been running that ran this business for 16 years, shit the bed. Okay, remember that problem?
Yeah,
we had with the P cards and all that nonsense. And we had to bring in that outside tech. And he worked on that problem for days.
So we started losing money, but we had
that
some
second.
Revenue, right?
We had some revenue coming in because we had that second machine.
That's right.
So it makes for a very compelling story for anybody that cares to listen to it. But at the end of the day, it had to be done. Mm-hmm. It had to be done.
Yeah, I think the decision point for an owner is if you've got one piece of whatever, one key person, one key piece of machinery, one anything, what happens when that goes down? Can you recover from it?
Right.
Can you recover if it takes you 4 weeks to get it back up and running, 8 weeks back and running? If a key employee in your business leaves, where are you standing? How long is it going to take you to replace that key machinery? You got to go through those what ifs, right? That's what an owner's supposed to do, is manage risk. And the truth was, to your point, the old warhorse did go down. And we had this new one limping along. Now, we can't be profitable with just one smaller machine.
Right.
But we can keep some cash rolling in, which is critical. Cash is the life. Businesses don't go out of business because of lack of sales. It's cash flow that puts a business under. So, anyway, so that was project number one. Why don't we fast forward to project two?
And when you refer to project two, are you're referring to
the second CapEx project we just got through? The office move, the engraving, the third machine.
Again, background on that, the decision was made that we needed to get a third piece of cutting equipment. Now, for a number of good reasons, it was decided that we were going to get a brand new piece of equipment. Okay, nothing used.
So now we're talking $250,000.
We kind of learned our lesson, but at the end of the day, that first used piece of equipment that we got may have cost us, when you add it all up, okay, it may have, all the costs, not just for the piece of equipment and the installation, the repairs, the eventual switch out of the engine that ran it. It probably cost us close to $250,000. Okay, and for whatever reason, it was such a refreshing idea to think about bringing in something brand new that wasn't going to have any of those problems occur. But we also knew that if there was resistance to bringing in that first piece, that second, space-wise, man, was there going to be resistance? We put a third one here, and we must have looked at 5 different options for making space for the engraved paver department. And but anyway, so the next really big CapEx project was bringing in a third piece of cutting equipment, and that was 6 months of really, really involved, laying that out, planning, and that's where luck really came in to play, because that's when we had a plan. Got the tape measures out again.
Lots of tape measures.
Brian, what? You're gonna a third machine? Really? What, are you going to stack that on top of the other one that you just brought in 2 years ago? Well, the answer to that question was no, but we were going to have to tear down existing buildings that were in the factory to make space to accommodate not just the third machine, but to accommodate the engraving department. And we needed space on the floor to accommodate the fact that you're now going to have 3 machines running. You're not buying another one because that's going to be a backup. It's going to sit over there idling.
Decision. Do we swap out one, or do we make it a third machine in operation?
Right.
The easiest thing to do would be to swap out one of your old ones, put a new one there. But that was just distasteful for me.
And bringing in the new one would have, just in and of itself, would have doubled our capacity because of its capabilities,
right.
Okay, and how efficient it was. But the idea was, no, wait a minute, if you're going to have a third machine, you're going to have floor space to accommodate the building of all the pieces that are going to be done with by bringing in that third machine. And there's going to be, you're bringing in new employees that have to train, and all that has taken place. But that was an even bigger leap than that first major CapEx project.
Well, it was roughly we had what spurred the project? Well, August of 2022, right? Mm-hmm. We had our old Warhorse machine go down for like 30 days.
Yeah.
And again, the smaller machine, the new one from the first CapEx project, was limping. It was producing
in the busiest part of our year.
Yeah, but it was, and we started missing deadlines, and customer service started this Eagle Compass that we had. We missed the dates on that because we had our big machine down for 30 days. Now we had some cash coming in, but not enough from that one machine. So that's where, all right, we got to get a third machine. We got to get out of this old Warhorse mentality.
Right.
Get a brand new machine. Didn't have quite a place to put it, but. Now, me as an owner, now I'm thinking back to bringing the cash balance down to zero. And we now at this point, we're a stronger company, larger sales, bigger team, better team. Right. We had some more assets. The strength of the company was better. Mm-hmm. But now I'm smarter, right? So I'm like, all right, let's be a little bit more responsible and think about how do we finance it? Do we do a lease? Do we put some debt in the business? So I said, all right, this is going to be, the machine cost alone was $250,000. This is going to be a $425,000 project. It's not just the machine you got to consider. It's the electrician, the carpenters, the riggers, all the people, all the support. The machine is usually like 50% of the deal. So this is a $425,000 deal. So I'm like, all right, why don't I get a loan for it? I'll get a 5-year loan.
I love
keep
this.
Some cash in.
I love this.
You know
story.
where this is going, don't you?
I can't wait to hear it.
So now I'm a sophisticated businessman, right? So I'm going to get pre-approved for a loan, and I'm a great credit worthy. I've got a great credit score.
Let's put it out there that this is not, you are not a stranger to this mode of financing a CapEx project.
Oh, okay. In 2014, just a little context here. 2014, in the business I acquired, we had the largest SBA loan in the entire country. We maxed out the 7A loan and the 504 loan. So we got $10 million of debt. My wife and I personally guarantee it. So we've done this before.
You had no problem negotiating these.
Yeah, so 200 grand, I can
choppy
do this.
waters.
So let's get 200 grand. Let's call up Bank of America. I've been banking with them for 20 freaking years, right?
Right.
And let's negotiate an equipment loan. We'll get whatever it was. It was a 6% rate at the time. This is before the Fed started going crazy with the interest rates in terms of hiking the rates. So we get a term sheet for $200,000, 5 years. I think it was like 5.5%, 6%, relatively cheap financing. And this was in August. We got this thing negotiated. And there were some things on there that I had to take possession of the money, the loan, by I think it was November 1st. And the machine was set to be delivered by October 1st. So no big deal.
Right.
So it all looked good. Fair interest rate, good terms. All right, we got the loan. Got it pre-approved. So $200,000 would finance this. I had a nice cash balance in the bank. So we're good, right? We don't have to go take the money down to zero in our bank account. Well, sometime around late September, we didn't have to jam it into our existing facility because this space that we're currently in became available. So now we can go into a bigger, broader project and move our engraving out the door and do a construction project.
Yeah, but you're not, okay, the one thing that you're not doing is you've got to impress on anybody that's listening to this podcast that before this space that we're currently in became available, we had the definition of the word shoehorn. We maxed out every square inch of space in the spot across the parking lot. And by the way, there's all kinds of drama going on in this space during this time period, and none of it was black and white. It was all gray area stuff. Is the guy that's in? Is the guy that was here? Is he going to leave?
Right.
Is the business that was here? Are they going to be able to continue to afford to be here? All that stuff.
The first key decision was we're not going to swap out and still remain a 2-machine operation.
Right.
We were going to make it an addition 2 to make it a 3-machine.
Make it a 3-machine
which sucked up all of our space and then some.
Correct.
Long story short, the space became available after the decision was made to make it a 3-machine operation. Mm-hmm. What the new space becoming available, let's say it was October, caused us to take possession of this machine not in October 1 or November 1, whatever it was, but right before Christmas. But my loan paper over here says I got to take all the money by November 1st. So the bank's calling me in the month of October, November. Hey, don't forget you got that fuse. I'm like, look, we'll give you the money or we'll send it directly to the company, the equipment manufacturer. I'm like, no, you can't do that. That's bad business to give an equipment supplier the money before you take possession of it. Just wait. It's going to get here in December. Give them the money then. All right. And they agree with me. I'm like, look, I'll take your money, or you can go give it to the manufacturer. But I'm telling you, that's bad business to give an equipment. So what if they go out of business? And now they got your money, which I'm accountable for, ultimately.
Yeah.
So just wait until the freaking machine gets here in December. But I got a fuse on the loan, right? So November comes around, the fuse goes up, and they call me up, and I'm like, sir, you didn't take the money. Yeah, I know we didn't take the money. I told you not to do it until December. That's why I didn't take the money. We had this conversation. Well, unfortunately, we've got to re-underwrite the loan. I'm like, no problem. Look, we had a great Q3. Our sales are record sales, good profits, our cash position stronger. We're a better company now than we were when you approved the loan in late August.
Sure.
Well, unfortunately, as you know, the Fed's been raising the rate. We've got to raise the rate. I'm like, what do you mean you got to raise the rate? I know the Fed's been raising the rate, but those terms are still going to be consistent. No, they're not. We told you about this, so you didn't take the money. I didn't take the money because I didn't want you to have the undue risk of an equipment supplier going out of business. So we get into a fight, a knockdown. Do you remember that fight?
I heard every word.
So, needless to say, they basically said, you're going to have a higher interest rate. And I'm like, those motherfuckers. So, and I'm going, now I'm getting heated. I've been banking with you for 20 years or 25 years. Before it was even whatever the company was, it was some other company because you went through 3 mergers, you keep getting bigger and bigger. This is not a local community bank. This is Bank of America.
Right.
And I'm dealing with, God knows, they've got like 3,000 vice presidents at Bank of America, and I'm dealing with one of 3,000. So talk about title inflation. You've never seen title inflation until you go to a bank. They're all vice presidents. It means absolutely jack shit. So they're telling me about how they've got to re-underwrite the loan. I don't give a fuck. We're in better shape now. But we got to give you the higher rate. And it was like 3 points higher or something crazy. And I'm like, you scumbags. So, by the way, this was a rational response from the bank. So I'm going to piss off all my banker friends out there. So I wasn't winning this battle, to say the least, to keep my old terms, even though I was doing the favor of a bank, not doing bad business. So I'm like, fuck you, I'm going to pay for it out of cash then. And then I'm going to pull my money from your account. So this was like a blood sport argument, right? At least that's how I remember it. I don't know if that's how you remember it.
Oh, no,
It's a long story.
The walls in our office are very, very thin.
Yeah, so this is all my skeletons coming out. This is not how you want to behave as a business owner. Because it's probably still, if it was the right thing to finance it, it was still the right thing. But I got blood sport, so I wasn't about to give them my money, take on the debt at a higher rate. By golly, they weren't going to win. So we ended up paying for it out of cash. But this is not how you want to behave as a business owner and then go into a blood sport thing. Now, why did I do it? Because we could. We were strong enough to do it. But that wasn't the right plan. I was going to finance it with you. I had it all figured out.
Yeah, but it was one of 3 or 4 different options that had been worked out. The bank was one of them, and the way you went was another one. But I remember that day.
What's the lesson as a business owner? Number one, don't do that. Don't go into a blood sport battle with your bank. Now they could have been good business partners too, and a shout out to John Rath. He's a chief lending officer at Lakeland Bank. He's educated me on money is the ultimate commodity. Anybody can give you money, but really it's the relationship that matters. So clearly here I am thinking 20 years. They didn't give a shit. The big national bank didn't give a shit about the relationship. I had no relationship manager. It was just a term sheet. The term said take the money by November 1st, and I'm going to take the money December 15th, and I'm taking the old term. So it was call it naivete on my part. But I'm going to fuck you. You're not doing that to me. So I paid for it out of cash, and we're fine with it. And obviously I had that pre-calculated, so I could go into that fight. And it felt kind of good telling them to go pound sand.
Great story. It's a great story. But again,
don't behave like that. That was probably not the right move, but I did.
Yeah, but the reason you acted the way you did in response to that.
It was an integrity thing, and there was all sorts of things.
Yeah, there's all sorts of, yes, there's whatever fueled that, whatever was the motivator behind that. You had you had a backup, you had alternatives that you could rely on that were, if not as equally as good enough that would have allowed us and did allow us to get that. By the way, we were committed. The stressful part of all of this is that we made the commitment, and once you make the commitment to the OEM, that's your piece of equipment. That's coming to you.
No matter what, it's coming.
Exactly, and all these other things that occurred, the space over here opening up, the issue with the bank,
there's some bravado.
Trying to line up, this is the OEM basically giving us a list of items.
That was things that had to be done.
Yeah, and it's on like 16 pages of documentation. And I'll never forget the day he said, Mike, I need you to handle this. Can you handle this checklist? And in the meantime, we're neck deep. Right. I mean, sales are, in the Q3 and Q4 of 22.
We killed it.
We were doing great.
Yeah. So,
but and again, we're doing this. We're trying to expedite sales. We're bringing in. We got to bring in the contractors. We got to bring in the plumbers. We got to look into the chiller situation. And in the midst of all this,
I pull the financing.
Well, in the midst of all this, we have to figure out how the hell we're going to power this shit, because bringing in a third machine,
didn't have enough power.
We didn't have enough power in the shop to make this work. And there's so many just great stories about this.
Going back to the retained earnings thing, we started the podcast with.
Sure.
Is that 20-year business with negative retained earnings, that they're either not making money or they're over distributing to shareholders or something. That's a funky number. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a bravado thing, and I don't plan on selling this thing, right? So this is not. There is no owner of the business other than my wife and I.
This is not a private equity jack.
But what I can say is, look, we got the little business here. We put 100% of our profits back into this business and then some. And the bank pulled their fucking loan, as they should have. It was on it, and I'm trying to help them by not paying for committing to finance it before the thing's ready. I think I'm being a responsible partner for a bank, and they're like, they don't give a shit, right? But I can hold that back up. Look, we funded this out of cash flow. So does Paverart make money? You might not. But look, we said, screw you to the $200,000 loan, and we wrote the check for it, right? Because we could. And it was a blood sport. Now, it's not, again, not the right behavior as an owner.
Like you said before, you don't have the VIG.
Right, so I didn't want to pay. Look, why pay the freaking... Now the rate was like 8%. So I'm doing the math in my head. Look, if Kim and I have money in the bank and we're earning a whopping 2% on it, or whatever the hell it is, now I got to pay the bank 8%, and I'm sitting on idle cash here that's used for investment. Screw it. I'll take that money, right? So anyway, not the right way to behave, but when I look back, that was a key, a little war story within that CapEx project.
Sure.
So now anyway, we got this podcast room.
Yes.
This is a luxury compared to what we've had people eating lunch in their cars forever.
I think a lot of small businesses, and I think this is one of the lessons learned, I think a lot of small businesses are always trying to keep up with having enough equipment, having enough people to maintain, the ups and downs of the sales cycle. And you're always chasing that. It's rare that you get the opportunity to get out in front of it and then get sales to have to catch up to that CapEx, okay? And if we're not there 100%, we're kind of there now, okay?
Well, now we have a podcast.
We've got to fill 3 machines. We have a process, and again, kudos to the operations guys. They've caught on, they get it, and they're managing it very well.
Let me go through a side little story. I don't know if you had this when you were growing up, but in kind of a interesting thing as I was growing up in your bedroom, rearranging the furniture. Like once every 5 years, I said, what if I take my bed from that wall to that wall? I'll kind of give it a new look. I always remembered changing the furniture in a room, right?
Sure.
Totally rearranging it, orienting. It was kind of like I had a new, fresh experience. One thing that caught me with this CapEx project, we're knocking down an office out in the old side of the business. We're knocking down an office and we're shifting them. And as you and I moved to this new building, we knocked down an office to create more floor space. And then in that process, they've got to relocate their offices. And I was pretty impressed with what Brian and John did. Number one, they cleaned the place up. They changed the orientation of the furniture. You walk in there, it's almost like a completely new look. Did you have that same impression?
I was blown away. And it looks brand new. That desk that we had gotten and it's not a desk. It's a
structure.
It's a workplace structure that's huge. That went from one building that got torn down and got put into another space. What used to be my office. And it's fantastic. I mean, it looks fantastic.
So one small benefit, or I guess takeaway, is when you're rearranging the furniture, which is what a CapEx project is. You're either tearing furniture out, you're putting new furniture in, you're rearranging it.
Mm-hmm.
Get your team involved, and they now take ownership of it, and they build the office the way they want to build it. We had nothing to do with that.
No.
We just say, hey, guys, all right, Mike and I are unboxing everything. We're moving in. You guys move your stuff. They're going to knock down that building, and they did a great job with that. And now they've got a little bit more ownership over their new space.
It's the never-ending. I don't want to use freight train because we used it for other things, but it keeps going on.
Look,
you cannot stand still.
Yeah, you've got to pull the Band-Aid off on these projects. The worst thing that we can do is delay that office knockdown and put it into here. So once you're in a CapEx project, you got to get that thing to the finish line as quick as possible,
right,
to get to that new world, so you can start making the increased cash flow that you got to make. Or else, how do you pay for the thing? You can't delay this stuff.
It's a very much a retail mentality, and every day that you're not operating, you're losing money.
Right.
Okay, and we know that for a fact. But that.
Why don't we tell the story as we went into the new office space yesterday that Brian and John had? Why don't we tell the story of Juan and trying to figure out, because we got some updates here. We got our lead engraver, Nick. He just had a baby, so he's on paternity leave, I guess you could say, for this week, right? And but now we got stuff that's piling up in our prep room, and we got to figure out how to sandblast it. And we got a new good employee that joined us in December, Juan, but he hasn't really sandblasted, which is the key engraving component.
He has a little bit of experience.
Practice
runs, exactly.
So
but
the question is, how do you get production flowing when your lead sandblaster is at home with the baby, as he should be?
Okay.
Well, the stuff just continues to. We're still working. But we're not sandblasting. We're doing all the stuff before the sandblasting.
Yeah,
let's talk about that story.
That part of the process is a bottleneck. You can't get it done. You can't get orders done.
You can't make a Paverart compass unless you're cutting pavers.
Right.
So if you're not cutting pavers, you're not making money. If you're not sandblasting on the engraving thing, you're not engraving.
You're not shipping.
Yeah,
you can't fill, which means you can't ship, and you can't fill orders. So look, I got called on the carpet yesterday on this, and it's we laugh about it, but it's actually very, very good. I'm probably not alone in this. And it's probably from years of having to manage a business in survival mode as opposed to growth mode. We are in growth mode now. We can't stop. That's an everyday and then this and then that mode that you're in. And I got called on the carpet in a meeting yesterday there was 4 guys in the meeting, and the other 3 guys kind of looked at me and said, what is your problem? And my problem was I didn't want to...
You didn't want to put Juan in the sandblast booth.
I didn't want to put Juan in the sandblast booth. Okay, now that's not a nice way of saying that, but it's the truth. And sometimes the truth hurts. And in this particular case, what I was concerned about was I was trying to weigh and play both ends of the spectrum here. When's Nick going to come back? Because Nick he runs the department. He's responsible for training new people, and he is the best. With all due respect to anybody else that previously worked here, he's absolutely the best blaster. He's the best blaster.
Shout out to our new dad.
I've ever seen. Okay, and he's terrific at what he does.
But the unknown for me
what we didn't know is when's he coming back, because we don't know that, and that's perfectly understandable. I mean, it's a brand new baby. You're getting used to this. You're getting settled in. But you actually took me to task on that. You said, "Look, this is what you're talking about. The bigger idea here is if you don't put the other guy in there, he's got some experience, okay? What's going to happen if he screws up? So he screws up 6 pavers.
It wasn't a unknown that you didn't want him in a sandblast booth. I kind of knew that. I mean, that's just kind of common sense. The unknown for me was he came forward and said, I want to get in there.
Right.
That was an unknown. Wait a minute. Time out, guys.
Right.
We got a guy that wants to get in. I thought he just wasn't saying anything.
That's exactly right.
So it's one thing, and I was just kind of going, I was part of the problem. Stasis. I made an assumption that we're just not putting him in there and he hasn't come forward. Well, he came forward to Brian.
Right.
And I thank God Brian says it. And that creates a whole new set of circumstances when a guy wants to go in there.
I downplayed that. I made that a secondary issue when in fact it should have been the primary issue.
Yeah, so
now, again, I can learn. I learned from that yesterday. And right now, he's in the booth. He's in the booth blasting now, and I'm anxious to actually, once this podcast is done, it's the first place I'm going to go. I'm going to see how he did.
But again, kind of like we started, what a blessing Greg was to solicit his, or unsolicited, give us some feedback, or give me feedback on the mental health episode. What a blessing we had Juan step forward and say, I want to get in there. He recognizes it.
Yeah.
What employee part of a growth company who steps forward, look, I don't care if Nick's out for 1 day, 24 hours, or 3 months. When you get an employee, or Nick is here, an employee wants to do something that's key to our business, you got to fucking let him go. You got to let that, well, and what's the worst that happens? He fucks it up.
Yeah.
Then you start over. So the question becomes, for a growth company, if you get people that want to step up as an owner or a manager, you've got no choice.
Right.
You say, all right, how quick can we do it? Regardless of circumstances, regardless of risk. When an employee wants to grow and is coming forward, your number one thing is, all right, let's do it. How quick can we do it? The question should be not if, it's, all right, when do we do it?
How and when?
Do we do it yesterday or do we do it in the next hour?
Right.
Now, we all agree. The interesting thing was John, Brian, myself, they all said, you learn by screwing up. The only way you can learn in this business.
That's what John, I remember John saying that.
Yeah, so John said, look, you got to screw up. You got to do it. I'm like, all right, let's get him in there to screw up. And then let's fix it, and let's have him screw up again. So one of the owner's mentality, and this is outside of CapEx, you've got to get employees growing or your business is not going to grow. When you got the attitude from the new employee that says, I want to get in there and help and do it.
He's made your decision for you.
Yeah, all right, so when I appreciate you saying gotten called to the carpet, because I agree with that, because I was heated. But not personal. It's just like, that's what we want.
I know. We're running a business here. This is not...
that's what we want. We want employees that step up and want to grow. So, but yeah, you did get called to the carpet, so there's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and this will rise. This will rise up again in the future. It always does.
No, that does, yeah.
But that, I can assure you that's on my end. That kind of thing's not going to happen again.
But the beauty of it is, because in the past, let's just say 8 years ago, you would have had to make that call and live with it and do it. Now you had 4 smart guys in a room talking about a topic.
Right.
And it becomes a little easier when you hear the perspective of everybody, right?
Sure.
So the hard part is, now, especially now with 2 buildings, is you got to get the group together so you don't lose some of that collective wisdom. So,
and we're still kind of learning that, but we've had that collective wisdom concept worked out really, really well yesterday.
one quick random shout out here, if I can.
Sure.
We had Reg Zeller, who is the CEO of Canecast, on, I think it was episode 34.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Here's a guy who bought a business, successful business, had all the challenges of a new owner, and he's building a roll-up, a holding company. He's going to get beyond $100 million and $20 million of cash flow. One of his pieces of advice on his episode was for owners or managers, find yourself a peer network. So that one stuck with me because I don't really have a peer network of fellow business owners. In the past, I've been part of Vistage, which is a CEO network. So I found one over the weekend. It's called Scale Path. It's a network of business owners. Every month they get together. It's a Slack community, all of that.
Okay.
So
Is it done? Do they get together virtually? How's that done?
virtually, Zoom calls, all that. We got our first one today at noon on how to hire.
Oh, great.
So, anyway, the point being is part of this podcast is we're bringing smart people on. A lot of times it's you and I, but when we bring smart people on and they have advice, for us not to learn from it. So anyway, shout out to Reg Zeller for that advice. Now, haven't done a damn thing with it other than join, and that's the easy part, pay the money.
Right.
So anyway, that's part of the, hopefully we'll start learning and we'll bring some of that in there. Smart guy, accomplished guy. To listen to it is one thing, but you got to take action. So
Sure.
Anyway, that's a little random shout out to Reg.
Terrific, and that was I like that. I really enjoyed that podcast. I learned a lot. One of the things in regards to this second major CapEx project things are now starting to calm down a little bit. That third piece of cutting equipment has been, it's been injected into the system. It's part of operations now. They've got the timing and the flow down. It took a couple of months for that to take hold, but it's starting to show the successes that we had with getting that second piece of cutting equipment. And
look, we built a moat around Paverart.
But what's interesting is what almost immediately that space that was created by tearing down the prep room to accommodate additional space for laying out projects and assembling projects on the floor. Immediately, it was like within 48 hours, that space was sucked up. Mm-hmm. It just
with revenue generating stuff.
Exactly. I mean, that vacuum was filled immediately, and there's nothing more. There's just nothing more ingratiating to I think you and I than actually see that happen. I mean, to see a plan, and that was the reason. Big reason for the plan was to have that thing kind of happen. I mean, we had the Philadelphia Union project out there.
But one of the
we
things,
had several other large projects just completely fill that space. We couldn't have done that 6 months ago.
One of the things an owner's got to do is they got to listen. They don't got to listen to every little detail. But one of the first conversations I had with Brian, it was kind of we have two businesses. We got Paverart and we got engraving. They're both very complementary. But Brian said we got to get rid of the engraving business. It's taking up too much space. We can't grow on Paverart with this engraving. We're never going to be able to grow. I didn't agree with it at the time because we didn't have enough business. They weren't competing for each other at the time. Mm-hmm. But the thought never left my mind that he was pure hardcore on Paverart, and he didn't even want to literally still doesn't look at engraving.
Right.
He is a paver artist to the extreme, to the fault almost. Mm-hmm. But the thought is a good one. His instincts were right. If Paverart could be all it could be, you can't be competing with 75 pallets on the floor with engraving.
Right.
So the fact that we can get it all out there. Now, does Brian's ownership of Paverart with that opinion? All right, big boy, you got it now. This whole building is Paverart, and we're going to keep creating space. Now you got the equipment, you got the staff you never had. His ownership, you would think, of the business and his opportunity to build this, what he thinks it can be. He doesn't have to compete with engraving. He's got 3 machines. He's got 2.5 talented people out there. Never had this. So the question becomes now he's got exactly what his instincts were. How good is Brian to take us to the future? Well, I'm not betting against Brian, but now he's got everything that he thought of when I came in and met Brian in 2018.
To his credit,
that's got to empower somebody, you would think. Now you've got $500,000 worth of investment out there in exactly what he said in 2018.
Sure, and I think
that's got to be kind of energizing.
I think to his credit and to John's credit, they've embraced it, and They have, they've essentially, the initial idea and the injection of the management end of this. Okay, we did several months ago. Here's why we're doing this. This is necessary. We're actually losing an employee here on Friday. We've got we have a succession plan in place to fix that. This is the way this business has to run now. We're
building a moat around Paverart.
This isn't 2010 anymore.
2010,
okay?
You had one old machine, and then that's it. And you compare it to today. So when I said one of the other episodes, Angelo's episode,
right?
Every business owner should bring in a trusted advisor and give a sobering assessment of your business. Not to be good to your feelings, but damage your feelings, and then bring them in 3 years later after you do the CapEx projects and whatever plan that you have to improve it, so that they can see the before and the after. Every time we brought somebody in, I feel like shit for 24 hours because they tell me things that I know are true, and they're smart, and I respect them. And then I get to work. Right, so you have your pity party of one, and you get to fucking work, right? I can't wait to bring Angelo back. I can't wait to bring the Techo Block guys back who gave us a sobering assessment. All shit that we know, but we're doing something about it. So when a Greg emails and you just ignore it and not do anything, then he's wasting his freaking time. When Techo Block comes in and gives us a few pointers, or Angelo comes in, gives us a few pointers, and we don't do anything, all we're doing is bringing people in and wasting our fucking time and their time.
Right.
Which is the last thing I'm going to do, because time is my currency, right? I'm in a race against time to make things better. Now, that's just my own scorecard. So if Angelo comes in and says, what about these three things? All right, let's evaluate it, and let's get to work on the things that make the most sense. It's up to us to figure out how to take action on the right things.
Sure.
But get people in. If you're going to go through an investment project and you're going to get serious about it, get some outside voices, because they're going to see things that you don't, or maybe you do, but you want to acknowledge, and then figure out how that factors in to whatever it is you're going to invest against for growth.
Good advice, very good advice. And your peer group, Reg talking about a peer group get together with other business owners that are in the same position as you are.
And I say I don't have a peer group. Angelo's a peer group. The Techo Block guys that came in to give us their opinion. Anybody that's smart that comes in, that's a peer group. Oh, you're trying to learn from Ken Bull. Give a shout out to that episode that we did. Ken, top executive at one of the country's most successful retailer, and oh, by the way, co-founder of Paverart. Why don't you give a little preview of that?
That's probably. I think that's the next one in the can.
One or that one. Yep.
That'll be episode 30,
37, 38.
37 or 38. That should be in the can very shortly. But I think it's a terrific episode. A terrific episode. I mean, it was the.
Can I brag about him because I'm an outsider with this? And he's your brother.
Please go.
So Ken Bull, co-founder of Paverart, along with yourself and along with Mick, rest in peace, talks about the story of how this business was created. Right. So just there, a founder who's now, by the way, one of the most successful executives at one of the best retailers in the country, Five Below. He's recently promoted. Congratulations to Chief Operating Officer, was a CFO. Tremendously well-run company. So, as a selfish business owner, the co-founder of Paverart, now one of the most successful executives in a Fortune 500 company, that's pretty freaking cool. But the episode is kind of inside baseball, how Paverart was started, and then he goes into a little bit about what the challenges were. I didn't know Paverart pitched 15 different investment groups for ongoing capital and went over 15. And he talked about the challenges about why that happened. And he goes through in grave detail what that is. So great episode, a lot of inside baseball, but here's one of the most successful executives talking through the early days of Paverart before it was Paverart. Pretty cool.
It was. I enjoyed it thoroughly. And, our pitch was always, the problem with the pitch was what this company could be as opposed to what it was when we were making the pitch. Okay? And that's...
I gave the sober and they all decided not to invest. And they all had the same reason. It's not going to be a scalable business.
Right.
Turns out, and I said it right there on the podcast, it turns out they were right. Never did scale it. So all 15 were correct. So that's one of the wisdom of the crowds was perfectly right. The question is, what would they say now? And I don't really care what they would say now, because I believe you got to have decades of grinding and growing So, but they're going to be harder pressed to say that. Now, we're building a freaking moat around this thing. And I love the people that try and kind of compete with us by spray painting shit.
Yeah.
So it makes me laugh. They spray paint a paver or paint it or stain it, and they call that art. I mean, give me a fucking break. It's going to break down in 2 years, and they'll even admit it'll break down in 2 years. And people are spending good money for this. So, all right, so it kind of that's my competitive streak. Just like the Bank of America thing, I get a little blood sport oriented.
I got to be honest with you. The greatest, I've had a lot of great days here. I mean, I've been here for 20 plus years. And I've had a lot of really great days, and I've had a lot of really shitty days, okay? They probably balance each other out, but one of the great days I had, I'll never forget, and this only happened like a month or two ago. You came into my office. You were absolutely effusive. You were like, and I'm going to drop an F-bomb here, but say, I love this fucking business. You came in and I just love it. This is so great. I just love doing this. And I sat up. I looked at you. We were about this before we moved into these offices, and I'm like, "Yeah, I know. It's I get it. It's."
Well, you're 70. You're still here.
That's why I'm still here.
And it's not like you're dreading coming to work. Or at least you're a pretty good actor if you are.
No. It's I just thought that was such a great that in and of itself really that heals a lot of things. When you're having a bad day and you hear that just lifts you up. But that was just so cool that you did that.
Well,
I thought that was really, really cool.
I generally don't put a filter on. I tell you what I'm thinking.
I love this fucking business. It made me laugh, but at the same time, it really made me feel good.
Yeah, the challenge for an owner, especially one like me, I got no filter, and I don't try and shield anything.
Yeah, but the history that I have with the business and with Kenny and Mick and all those investors and those endless trips through the shop, talking about the business plan, going through all this stuff in great detail, having this, going through 2 sales of this business. It's, it took this long to get somebody here that got it, okay, and had the skills to help move the needle forward, to use the term that you use.
Well, you're making me blush.
Then that's not why I'm saying it. This is validation for me, okay? There was a time when me having that talk with my wife, I was making a great living, okay? I was in a very stable job, in a very stable business. Again, was one of the people that I've always been involved with startups, and that was a startup. And I was involved with building that business. I was on the road endlessly for a long time. And that, having made the decision to, get a chance to work with my brother and this new guy, Mick Soroka, that I spent the better part of a year to almost a year and a half getting to know and know really well, God damn it, I knew we had something here. We have something that people want to buy. And it took 15 fucking years for that to come to fruition. So when you came into the office, I love this fucking business. That lifted me up like, yeah, he gets it. This is the right guy.
Right.
Okay. And
I appreciate
that made all the difference in the world.
That's pretty cool that you said that. So. I take pride in, every time Ken gets promoted or Five Below kills it on their earnings call,
right.
I take pride in that. And I'm a small shareholder of Five Below for years, right? I go into that store and I think Paverart, right?
Yeah.
Paverart exists because of that kind of talent with yourself, with Mick, and now this guy's running one of the most successful things.
By the way,
I shouldn't say. I mean, they got
a little aside. I can't invest in Five Below.
Well, you're family. Yeah, it's
because I'm family.
Whatever that would be.
That whole insider trading nonsense. So everybody else is getting rich on Five Below except me.
There's little rules that owners need to. Owning a business is not sexy.
Right.
It's not easy. I probably share too much with employees, but I try not to share things like, financial distress, like that first CapEx project going down. But everyone kind of probably felt that we're grinding away, trying to get through it, and we're stronger now. All of these projects that you get through, even with hiccups, like we talked about, if you had to grade it in the moment, it would have been a D- because we overblew the budget, disaster of the equipment. but you got through it, and you look back on it and says, now it's an A+, because you, rightfully so, 3 years of hindsight, how is it not an A+ right now? But it's long term. It's hard to see that. In the thick of things, it's a fire. But, like I always talk about Seth Godin, the acid test that he always has. If your business went away today, would anybody fucking miss it? I think that answer is yes for Paverart, right? That doesn't mean we're successful, we're investable, or any of those things. That the 15 investors that said no to capital for Paverart, I think they were right. I think they would be hard-pressed to say that now.
At that time.
It don't freaking matter, because I don't need investors. I don't want people telling me what to do. Don't want to be on a clock. So the beauty of small business ownership is the moment the private equity guys or investors, professional investors, get in, they've got a say, and they want their money back, and they want a timeline. They're going to force you to sell. And so I believe the world of small business, the opportunity is run the thing for 20 years and see what you can do with it, and see how good you are. See how hungry you are to create something great.
I think the difference is that when you've been through, with this business, and again, it's 20 years and a month that we've been in business. When you've gone through just really difficult, at times, difficult times, you take some small measure of triumph in the little victories, but in the back of your mind, there's that driving force that says, I know this business can be successful. I know this is a product that people want. And that just keeps grinding at you and grinding at you and grinding at you. It gets you up in the morning. It gets you in the car. It gets you into that commute. It gets you here. It gets you working stupid hours. But when somebody who's doing the same, you could have very easily jumped ship 3 years ago, okay? You could have done that. That's what I've come to learn, is that that's not how you're built, okay? And it's nice to have to be in the trenches with somebody that feels the same way about it as I do, okay?
Well, look,
it's not giving up, okay? Now, at some point, my wife's going to come, my wife is going to come to me and she's going to say, okay, moron. Look, your life horizon is shrinking. You got to be,
As will my wife, because every time you do one of these capital investments, that's money that you're not putting in your pocket.
And she's your partner,
right?
She's your partner.
That's the reality is I can't ignore that, because I keep throwing money at the business and investing for all good reasons. But what she says, can we slow down a little bit and maybe take some for ourselves?
Yeah,
well, that's reality.
I think I think that's a very reasonable request.
So you've got, and it's a fair, cogent analysis, right? But for me, the ownership thing, the challenge is figuring out. It's kind of like that mental health battle, right? That we were talking about in the last episode.
Right.
The fight that you have as an owner is not the competition, although that's part of it. It's not the suppliers and their challenges and customers and regulatory. All of those things are the real fight. It's with the man in the mirror. And getting right with yourself and your mental clarity and all of that.
Yeah.
What keeps me energized is yesterday's conversation with John, you, myself, and Brian. Mm-hmm. And they mentioned that Juan wants to step up and get in that booth. And fuck yeah, he does. Now let's let him at it. That's a sign of culture. Now, no one talks about culture. The private equity guys can't put it in a spreadsheet, but it's everything. Culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah.
That old saying. That was an example of culture, where they said, he wants to get in there? Get him in there. Make him screw it up. That's great. That does more than any CapEx project can do.
Absolutely.
That is the culture of growth right there.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you had that conversation when John first came on in 2020, that's not the conversation we would have had. I don't think.
Probably not.
Brian, yourself, me, and John, brand new employee, that conversation I don't think happens. We don't even have that person. We were fighting with other battles, but that is everything. So the owner's got to say, do you have a culture that can get to that next level? Those are little signs that says, hell yeah, you can when you have those conversations. That doesn't mean everything's working here. We got a lot of shit that ain't working that we got to fix, but those are the things that got to keep you moving in the right direction. And those little jolts of energy. So I leave home last night, and I go up the turnpike 80 miles, and I'm thinking about, let's get him in that blast booth. That's where you got to get your energy from, are the people willing and able, and can they screw up and then get back on a horse? That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And that can't be measured in a spreadsheet.
No.
But it means everything.
It's, this is like the third podcast in a row we've had like a serious bloodletting. And
I aired my dirty laundry about Bank of America. That's the most unprofessional thing you can do. But I felt good doing it, so I did it.
I'll never forget. You hung up the phone. There was a big when you hung up that phone. Yeah, you slammed that baby down.
Yeah, it felt good.
I got up out of my chair. I walked around, got to the door. I poked my head around the corner. I said, "You okay?" It
would have bothered me more. You just hang up the phone and done nothing.
And the reason I did that was because I knew it was going to stoke you up again. And
told the story all over
and
again.
it was going to be a half hour before we were both going to get back to work because you had to get that shit off your chest, and you did, and it's we laugh at it now, but it's all part of the mishmash that became that second major CapEx project. And look, none of this works. None of this shit works unless you go through all of this.
Yeah, if you don't have that fire in your belly, if you're not willing to toe up, like I talk about that scene in Moneyball with Brad Pitt.
Right.
How much? Yeah, we're going to trade away the Rookie of the Year. And how much do we believe in this thing? Do we believe in this thing or not?
Yeah.
So, all right, you're going to punt on a loan. You still going to do it? Well, fuck yeah, we're going to do it. We either believe in it or not.
Yeah.
So, all right, I got $100 at the end of the year. I got $1 million at the end of the year. How much do you want to put in? Well, do you believe in this thing or not? Or are you just going to take the money? And by the way, there's nothing wrong with pulling all the money for yourself.
That's really refreshing. But people, the only thing that, unless you're a business owner or you're thinking about starting a business, the only thing that some people who are going to listen to this podcast are going to probably take away from this is, their experience. It's a very similar experience to running your family, okay? Running the finances in your family. And if you're able to negotiate those, I consider them to be very treacherous waters, because, we've got free will here in this country. You can do whatever you want, all right? It's easy to step into that trap of, well, I can take the economic stress off me by, doing this turnover of credit cards nonsense, or, take out a line of credit with the bank, $100,000 line of credit with the bank. Yeah, you can do all of that, and all of that, you're allowed to do that in this country, and it's done all the time. But the disciplines that it takes to manage that are outlined, I think, in this podcast. The disciplines that you have to go through when you're talking about spending, spending $145,000 to $150,000, CapEx one, and then close to $450,000 on CapEx two. These are big leaps. You got to plan. You got to risk assess. You got to have a team around you.
You got to have some bloody battles. You got to recognize when you screw up.
It's
you
not
got to
easy.
recognize when you got to reset.
Yeah, exactly.
None of it's easy. The easiest thing to do is do none of that, and just make your money, put it in your pocket, invest it in the market, and then just try to diversify out your holdings. It's probably the easiest, safest way to do it.
That's right.
How freaking boring. So you got to be wired for growth. You got to want to go for that, and then that is not just because you want to grow. It's you've got the skills, you've got the network, you've got the team, you've got the brand. There's a whole host of considerations we covered on
That's right.
None of it's easy.
This is not a private equity investment two-step, a dance that's that does nothing to improve the business, but it only improves the bottom line of that private equity firm. This is not what that is.
Right.
And you came in here with a very clear idea that this business is going to grow. This business is going to make money, and we're going to do things here differently than they've been done in the past.
And all the people that are here that choose to be a part of it, kind of like we started. I gave that little comment about the economy, and I don't freaking know if the economy is better or worse. I don't really care.
Right.
Brian, John, if they dial the clock back to 2018 and compare themselves to right now, are they significantly better off than they were then? If that answer is yes, and we can say that across the board, then we're heading in the economy of the 4 employees, of the 10 employees. If the personal economy is a hell of a lot better, we're doing the right thing. If it's not, we're not doing the right things.
Right.
So my economy is the economy of 10 freaking people, right?
Yeah.
And if they dial the clock back to whatever base that you and I were talking about with that hypothetical argument, is their personal economy better? If it is, we're doing okay, and we're doing the right things. And none of that is a function of who's in office, by the way.
Yeah, that's I think to our credit, as a general rule, we don't talk about religion or politics here. And there's a couple of people that would like to actually hear what we have to say. The problem is the level of this, the actual volume in the room. We'd have to kind of move move these things away a little bit because the volume in the room would go up. But to make a long story short, I thought you wrapped it up pretty well there. I think that's a pretty good summation for the two major CapEx projects that we've gone through, and hopefully this second one will pay off. It appears to be paying off initially, and
if anyone, let's throw a little test out there, kind of a test if anyone's listening. If anybody has a growth project / investment opportunity they've been contemplating, give us a little paragraph. And if you want us to remain or keep your business or situation confidential, we're happy to do that. And then we can make that a case study, and we can make that an entire podcast. And we would give you our wisdom on what that is, some of the things that we would consider to move forward or not. Or if we were to move forward, what are the things that we would consider and kind of some steps. So if anybody is thinking, yeah, I've been thinking about X, Y, and Z, I wonder what these guys would say. Put it on a little paragraph, or you want to jump on a Zoom call, I'm happy to do that. And then we'll break that down with all. It's free advice.
It's a terrific idea.
Which, by the way, free advice is probably worth what you paid for it.
Hello again. You can call this an epilogue. You can call it an addendum. You can call it whatever you want to this particular episode where we talked about CapEx projects. But in hindsight, while we were, as we tend to do, for just about everything, we debriefed here. And that debriefing brought up a subject that we probably should have brought up during the podcast, and we're going to bring up now, and we're going to add it to the end of the podcast.
Or in the middle of the loan fight.
Correct.
Discussion.
Talk about the downside of hanging that phone up
telling the bank to go fuck themselves
so violently with the bank, and having made the decision. It was an alternative. You knew this going in, of actually self-funding this.
Yeah.
What's one of the other results that was not brought up in your discussion when we were talking about this?
And thank you for bringing us back to the table on this. But we talked about retained earnings and what that is. Profit that gets retained does not come into a shareholder's pocket. In this case, myself and my wife. By me telling the bank to go fuck themselves and not taking a $200,000 loan because I felt slighted, lack of integrity, and all those things, which might not be rational, but it's how I felt, and I told them to go fuck themselves. By not having that $200,000 come in, that meant we weren't going to take a distribution. So it's binary, right? So if the loan comes in, even though at a higher interest rate, we have a stronger capital position that we can then distribute. So me getting into a fight with the bank and not taking a loan essentially means that's money we're not putting in our pocket.
Right.
So I think that's, and by the way, if you got to go home and tell that to your wife, that's not who's running our family finances. She's in charge of Olivito Inc.
Right.
The finances and where we put our money. Do we save for college? She makes all those decisions.
That's a long drive home.
That's a hard consequence fight for the bank.
Right.
But I think I would have felt worse doing it. So I rationalized it. But the fight was a good story, right? It was a true story. It showed you the blood sport that is involved with business, the emotion. I don't think any of that is necessarily productive, but the consequence is, all right, tough guy, now you're not taking that money out of the business and you're not putting it in your family's Inc., right? Your thoughts on that?
Well, again, had you not done your stint with L&M Foods and taken on all of that debt, the tremendous amount of debt that you took on, and basically rebuilt that business, I don't think this happens. You might have thought differently about self-funding this particular pretty big CapEx project for Paverart. My thoughts are, look, you haven't made a bad decision yet. The confidence that I have in the way we're going to move this thing forward is 100%. I don't see this. I don't see a downside to any of this. But if I had to go home to my wife and tell her, guess what I did today?
They're fun conversations.
That's it. Yeah, but guess what I did today? I don't, and I don't know if you're going to like this, honey, but for all intents and purposes, we're not going to take a distribution this year because we're putting it into a new space. We're gonna put it into a new piece of cutting equipment. We're going to put it into a new space. We're expanding the business, and I basically called the bank a son of a bitch.
Yeah, it's from I've said this in the past. I am not a great investor, so I've taken Kim's got a self-directed IRA in her name,
right?
And I took that and invested it in a small little business that hindsight's 2020, worst investment of my life. Husband and wife operator. They were more worried about being parents to the kids.
Let's make sure everybody understands the small business you're referring to
That's
is not Paverart.
It's not Paverart, but disaster of a business. I did limited due diligence. They pissed away the money within 3 or 4 months. Horrendous investment. Tried to form a board unsuccessfully. Weren't open to feedback. 35 reasons on how I personally screwed it up. It was my fault, and I paid tuition to a level that I never should have with her IRA. That was a long train ride home from the city, right? This one, the Bank of America fight that caused me to say, screw you to your loan, and now we're not going to take that money out of the business. We'll self-fund it, draw our working capital down. Those are kind of things. So the beauty of having a spouse that understands how you're wired, I kind of swing for the fences, I do things under my terms, is going to cause some of those bad investments, some of those fights. I also tend to think, this is how I rationalize bad behavior, we're here in a better spot because of that intensity, in part, right? Maybe some of that mental freight train stuff that I've learned to deal with it and use it in a productive manner is why we're in a better spot. Now, by the way, that doesn't mean if you pull me out of the Paverart situation or whatever situation, put someone else in, maybe they'd be in a better spot. I don't know, but they're not here. We are.
We talk about this all the time. We beat everything up. We may even be charged with over talking a lot of things, but by the time we're finished talking about something, everything's out on the table. All the options are there. You know exactly what's going on. You know the good and the bad. That can't be a bad thing. In this particular case, the one thing that you've got going with Kim is that Kim has been through all the wars with you, okay? And she's come out the other side with you. And I don't see a downside to any of that. Bev's the same way with me. She trusts me implicitly, okay? And when I tell her something, it's the truth. And when I say, look, I have every confidence that what's going to happen at Paverart in the next few years is going to be something that's much better than what we ever had before. And, trust me, I want to hang on to this. And I want to be part of this positive ride as long as I can. But again, it's, what was the third podcast we did was about our spouses. Well, she's not, she gets it. And it's not one of those, okay, it's Mike again. Mike wants to.
But this is a little podcast project for us, right? So what I think one of our commitments when we had the idea to start this thing is, let's be real. Let's not edit this shit. So Dominic edits for aesthetics, but not content. He don't pull shit out and add stuff in, and we don't try and script this thing. We have a general outline, but that was a pretty big omission on my part. The fact that it wasn't intentional, and we're back here but anytime you make a decision related to capital, not to take a loan, means you're not putting money in your pocket. And that was a fun little war story about me telling Bank of America to go fuck themselves. The reality is, the decision is, we're not pulling that money out of the business then. And I got to go home and tell the spouse that.
Right.
So this stuff has real consequences.
It has real consequences, but what what you're doing too is, you wouldn't have done that had you not known in the back of your head.
We can do it.
We can get to $5 million.
Okay.
We can get to $4 million. We can get to $3 million. We should have no problem getting there. Now we have the capability. That's what I was saying before. Before, we were always chasing the space. Okay. We were always chasing the number. Now we've surpassed that, and now the numbers got to catch up with the space.
Look, as the other, I guess, maybe a little bit of, as we reflect on this episode a little bit, the clarity of Brian coming in saying we got to rebuild this machine. This company is stronger by waving the white flag and said, all right, we fucked this up,
right,
but we can rebuild it and have a better outcome. That's a huge victory for the company, even though we blew the budget.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Huge victory. In my mind, for me fighting my own battle with the person in the mirror, by me taking that loan at the higher interest rate and feeling slighted from an integrity standpoint, and me looking out for the bank saying, don't give them the money, the equipment's not ready. By me taking that loan so me and Kim could have taken maybe a distribution, that would have been freaking distasteful for me. Mm-hmm. And she would have invested the money and made good use out of it, but I'm like, I can't have that go on. Now, that might be short-sighted, but that's how I freaking feel, right?
Sure.
So you need that fuel of the bad project turned into a positive project, and you don't need freaking baggage like taking a loan so you could take a distribution and then grinding your teeth every month you're going to make that payment, which is what I would have done. So some of the, and again, it sounds like I'm rationalizing bad behavior. To a degree, maybe that is, but you got to set yourself up as an owner,
sure,
not to have ankle weights being put on you, and have as much motivation, have as many of those meetings that we talked about where, get them in a blast booth. You gotta have a fuel to the fire, and that's what this is about. You don't get to the 20% of the bell curve by putting ankle weights on you.
It's hard for me to find a bad decision, a really bad decision that's been made here in the last 3-4 years. It's difficult to find that. And the decision that you made after that really interesting phone call with the bank occurred, that decision, I have every confidence is going to be that was the best decision you could have made. It really is. And it's going to pay off big time. Look, numbers are up again this year.
Well, I think this comes down to the reason why is it epilogue or prologue or whatever it is that we just inserted here?
Let's call it epilogue.
They do have consequences, and we didn't bring that one up. You're not pulling the money out. Go tell your spouse that, and be able to be comfortable with that decision.
Sure.
Obviously, think it through. So I knew our numbers cold, so it wasn't an impulsive decision. But,
no, of course not.
They were gonna at least feel a little pain from it. Now it's Bank of America. This is not even around an error on their thing, so they don't give a shit. They're a big, massive bank and all that. So, but it would have had detrimental impacts to my own psyche every time I wrote that check and I took that money with changed terms, and they were perfectly right to do it. So they didn't do anything unethical. It was all spelled out. So I'm not casting aspersions on how they did it, but for me it didn't feel right, which is why I told them to go fuck themselves, and that did feel right.
Yeah, and trust me, if that had, I've got pretty good instincts too, and after doing this I'm now, for me it's like what, since we actually sat down and started thinking about this, it's about 22 years. My instincts are pretty good, and I can't think of a negative. I just can't think of a negative with this. I can't. It's not. There's nothing there that I consider to be bad. I only see good things happening, and the beauty of this is we're in the trenches every day. We're taking orders every day. We're getting quotes out every day. I can see what's coming in, what's going on. It's only going up. Hopefully, knock on wood, I haven't jinxed it, but had there been an issue, if I felt strongly enough that the decision that you made to go that route was a bad one, you know me.
You would have said it.
I would have more than said it. Mm-hmm. I would have been very vociferous, and I've been a pain in the ass about it, or the nudge concept that we've talked about. So, all right, everybody. I hope you got that. We had to add that. It was it was not our choice. It was just we had to put that in.
That was an error of omission.
But it was an error of omission. Oh my God, that's the Catholic part of him coming out. At any rate, thanks again, everybody. Listen, have a good week.